Welcome to the Glow Podcast. I'm super excited to be here today. I have a very exciting guest with us today, Bob, and we'll get an introduction to him in a little bit. But just kind of starting out, if you are new here, we are Tailored Marketing and we help aesthetic clinics, skincare clinics, and dermatologists grow their practices and increase their revenue. So if you have any questions about that, drop a comment below. Bob, I am so excited to have you here today and have some fun conversations, but just kind of starting out, give an introduction to my audience for us.
Well, Taylor, thanks for inviting me to be a guest. It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to participating. I am the owner of Generations Medical Aesthetics. It's a med spa outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. And we specialize in advanced lasers and energy devices. We also do quite a range of all the other non-surgical aesthetic procedures as well.
Okay,
So,
awesome.
So I've been doing it for a while. I'm actually 93, but a little lasering and Botox keeps me looking a little bit younger.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And so, how did you kind of get into the field? Like, what was your introduction to the medical field, the aesthetic field, all of the above?
Well, I actually went to school for pharmacy originally and was a little bit disenfranchised with what that meant. It ended up looking like I would be counting pills or looking under a microscope. And that didn't suit well for me. A buddy of mine who was in nursing program and who was in ROTC, the Army program there, Reserve Officer Training Corps, with me, told me that they were looking for male nurses a lot and that I should just switch over to there from pharmacy. It might be a better fit. I told him I didn't think I would look good in high heels, and he laughed at that jokingly and stuff too. But to make a long story short, I did interview with the dean of the nursing program there, and she was smarter than I was. She knew exactly how to recruit me, and she did. And it was a very good choice. My background is nursing and so forth. The military had paid for some of my education. I owed them some time. And when I went into the military, it was very early on. I was at Letterman Army Medical Center in California during my orientation, and I found that my supervisor caught me sitting around doing nothing within the first 2 weeks and said, "Early, you just got volunteered for a laser class." And it was meant to be a punishment. But that was really my first introduction with lasers. And I got some background and training in that very, very early on in the industry as it was starting to introduce lasers into the medical field a little bit. And after that, I filled my obligation with the military, and I did play with some lasers a little bit and help train. When I was done with my military tour and settled back into the civilian population, I was really working in plastic surgery in private practice and so forth. And I was in the OR and was an OR tech and first assist and got a lot of experience in that portion of the medical field and nursing. Over time, the industry wanted commercial lasers, and they were looking for people with laser experience, and someone found me and asked if I'd be willing to help them do some research and do some data collecting and so forth. And I said yes. And ironically, they didn't give me a lot of stipulations. I didn't have a budget, but I was able to publish an article my first year and then a second article and so forth. And it started to become making me a little bit of an expert in some of the data. And that opened up some other opportunities for bigger laser companies to ask me to help or teach. And so I ended up teaching for some of the bigger laser companies, help certify other healthcare professionals. And this is, really where I landed my career, sort of picked me, in reality. I had a passion for helping people, and the technology was advancing so fast, I saw a real need or a use for it or a demand for it in reality.
Yeah.
And that's really what ended up morphing. I ended up with being hired by an internal medicine group to help develop or a aesthetic division, and I did, but I became frustrated with the way the business was being run. And I'm sure, like a lot of entrepreneurs, there's really two main ways they get involved. One, they are just so irritated with their boss, they think they can do it better, and they finally do. Okay. The other is they either invent something or discover something, and those are the ways that really most people do. And I was in that first category where I thought like, oh my God, I can do this better. A lot of people in medicine, I have noticed aren't always great at the business side. They have a tendency to practice business the way they practice medicine, which is slow, conservative, then get a second opinion, and then a third opinion, then an expert opinion, and by that time they're out of business. And very few medical people have business type backgrounds. They're lucky if they do. Some of the more successful doctors and so forth have gone back to get their MBA, and they are on a fast track, by doing that. It makes sense to have a business something, in medical because it is business as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's a very important piece to it, because you can be a really, really great doctor, but if you don't know anything about business and you're running your own practice, then that can be very, very challenging. You almost need the duality of both.
Yeah, I agree.
And so you mentioned when you were working at the first place, you had some frustrations kind of with the way things were being run. What were some of those frustrations where you realized, oh my gosh, I can do this so much better?
Don't let me relive the PTSD. And I'm sure a lot of practices or practitioners and healthcare providers can run into this stuff. People are always nice, and I have to assume that everybody has good intentions first. It doesn't mean they're good at everything. So we may have very compassionate healthcare providers or owners, but I would get emails saying, Bob, we'd like to have a meeting with you from like 9 to 10. And I would say, I'm sorry, did you say you want me to stop generating revenue?
Yeah.
So that we could have a meeting to discuss how we're going to generate revenue. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I would have to deal with, and that didn't make sense. I'm like, how could we possibly have a meeting every week for an hour and a half in the middle of revenue generating time that we couldn't, discuss once a month with an email or a text or after work maybe, would have been better.
Yeah.
But, that's just what I would consider the short-sightedness of maybe the business side of it. So
yeah,
if you can influence or change their mind, that's great. If you can't, buy the practice.
Yeah, do it yourself, right?
Do it yourself. That's exactly right.
Yeah, no, I mean, that completely makes sense. You're in this mindset of kind of a more business mindset, like you said, of, okay, we need to be generating more revenue. This is how our time should be spent to do these tasks, but not everyone's always on the same page with that.
Yeah, that's true. The original owners of the practice had hired an MBA to see if they could replicate the business model that I had created. And I remember he and I had a little bit of a discussion about what the goals were. And I said, well, what did you think the goals were? And he says, well, I think our goals are to become the best laser center in Northern Virginia. And I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe you're saying that as an MBA. The goal is always financial first.
Yeah.
And that would be to make your financial goal. You can't help people if you're out of business. I said to be the best laser center, that would be a means to getting to your goal. And your mission statement should be based around your philosophies and your passion and things to that effect. But the goal should always be financial first. Everything else will fall into place if you're doing it right.
Yeah. Cash flow is always number one in business. If you have cash, you can do a lot of different things for sure. And it opens up a lot of doors. So I completely agree with you. Kind of moving to a little bit different, obviously still on the business side, but moving into the aesthetics a little bit. What makes you all different as a laser treatment center than other med spas? Because obviously you have a focus on lasers, but you also offer other things as well. So what really sets you apart from other medical spas in the Washington, D.C. DMV area?
It's a very competitive area, and it's a high density. I look at statistics like density of population to plastic surgeons and so forth, and what you'll see is things like, Washington, D.C. and places like New York and L.A. and have high ratios of plastic surgeons to the population. It attracts competition, or I would say people who can be successful in those fields, and they're going to be in those areas. I think what makes us different, and I'm a little bit sad to say that, and I find that everyone who is probably successful in the industry probably has a lot of the same answers, which is like they're actually the patient's advocate. And I find that is really what it comes down to in the end. And it might sound easy to say, yeah, take care of your patient, do the right thing. But I find in the real world, it actually is harder for people to do that when economies aren't doing so well. I see ethics violations. I see dentists and chiropractors doing Botox because they want cash flow. And to me, that's if your goal was to make money versus help people. Remember, your goal was financial originally, but to the means to get there, really, if you want to help people, and that's really your goal, money will follow. And
Yeah.
so our business model really was built around being the advocate for the patient, transparency, safety, spending a lot of time educating. And education is, I'm going to say, always the secret success for helping, especially in anything with healthcare.
Yeah, education's super important.
Yeah.
And you're right, especially within the medical industry. Obviously, like we talked about, cash is king in any industry, but also you have to do it in an ethical way, especially in the medical field. You can't be, if you're a chiropractor, it's not really very ethical to be doing Botox because you aren't really the expert there, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, no, that completely makes sense. And so you made a good point too about the education piece. So, right now, how are you currently educating your patients and even really the general population, you know, because we have access to so much information with social media and obviously the internet and everything like that. So, how are you all currently educating people?
That's a great question. It starts at every single level of the business would include education. And that I would start with our own healthcare providers. We will spend a fair amount of our budget every year doing advanced education for all of the nurses and doctors and everyone that, is involved with that business. And we will constantly share that. Sometimes we'll have to split and divide by sending someone to one advanced training and someone else to another and come back and then teach the rest of us, So it's a lot of shared knowledge. It's also creating an environment that is very open to communicating. We're not competing with each other. It is designed to be an environment for the providers that is very open. It's knowledge sharing. It's trying to verbalize what you know that didn't know how to teach though. So it helps each provider to have another expert, even in the office. It's a good idea to network with.
I'm having trouble with the connection. Please try again in a moment.
Nope, it's okay. We can edit it out.
Okay.
Don't worry.
But I was talking about the training the staff and also with networking with other experts in their field.
Yeah.
Find that people who are really good at what they do know everybody who's an expert, nationally, internationally, locally, regionally. And it's a very friendly relationship. Nobody's really competing with each other, even if they technically are competing. No one looks at it that way. And so It's really important for the industry to share its knowledge instead of hoard it. So, I used to think if I told the competition what our secret formula was for combining lasers or something, they would all just compete with me. And then I realized there's just not enough of experts. So it's better to share it. So it's better for the whole industry. So I found even by sharing knowledge with even people in my own zip code, it didn't hurt us at all. It just made people refer to us as another third-party endorsement. And so we actually grew from sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. So I think it's a good lesson for everybody in the communities that are good at what they do. Share your knowledge. There has to be.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you view it in a really good way. It's like, it's not competition. It's just sharing knowledge with other experts. There's enough people that need the treatments or want the treatments that you're offering that there's enough people to go around.
Yeah,
for
there's enough
everybody.
business. There's, and everything. So that was the first level of educating. The second one really comes down to actually educating, like I said, other healthcare professionals, dermatologists, OBGYNs, the people that I trained the most, hired from laser companies, were actually dermatologists. And you would think that they would be leading that, and they often are. But managed care is different than aesthetics. Sometimes managed care is so busy, and they have about 7 to 12 minutes to get you out before they start losing money, that doesn't allow a lot of time for the providers to take extra time for training or continue education, especially for something that requires a lot of hands-on.
Yeah.
And I think that lasers and injections and things like that do require knowledge first and then hands-on and then repeat it over and over and over again until you have enough experience and knowledge to become a really good resource for your patients. And
Yeah.
so the next level is actually training your own customers and teaching them and educating them. And that comes with time, and a lot of experience comes with that. It's not just telling them what you know, it's applying it to them as an individual.
Yeah.
And if you do that well and do that right, the trust will go up higher. Reading your audience well, knowing your audience, protecting them from even themselves, from what they don't know, is still the job. Safety still comes first. So a lot of times patients will come in. There's so much social media out there now. I'll never forget an early experience of mine that was what I considered a faux pas that I could have, I learned from. A woman came in and asked for if we did chemical peels, and I said, yes, we do chemical peels. She goes, well, I'd like a chemical peel. And I said, let's do a chemical peel. And we gave her the best chemical peel. It was so good we could have written an article on it. And 2 weeks later, she came back and said it didn't work. And I said, what do you mean? It was the best chemical peel. She goes, well, I still have these lines on my forehead. And I said, oh my God, that's really Botox. And my mistake
that's not what
was
chemical peels are used for.
Yeah. My mistake was I let the patient tell me what she wanted or what she thought it did without questioning her or anything like that. And that was an amateur's mistake. So, what we learned is really to help the customer help themselves by asking them what bothers you. Even though she says, I want a chemical peel, you might say, well, why don't you tell me what bothers you first? And now when we lay that out, we can start giving them choices or all the options, talk about the pros and cons of every option, start from the least invasive, least aggressive, least expensive, and move your way up, continuing to talk about the pros and the cons. It's not meant to scare people, but it still has to be transparent and honest. And so has to be covered, so that they all have informed decision-making abilities, and it must be informed. And that is how we continue to educate. We also do things like donate to some charities, which also is a very good form of educating. Offering to treat like breast cancer scars for free are great ways to open the community and other healthcare professionals or other medical groups. Offering to remove tattoos from, let's say, reformed incarcerated people might also be a good way to help educate or help create jobs where they otherwise wouldn't get jobs if they had the tattoo across their forehead. Yeah. So, it's a way of giving back a little bit. And that might be the difference between an entrepreneur and a business person. An entrepreneur is a business person, but a business person isn't always an entrepreneur. The difference to me is that an entrepreneur gives back or does something for the community is in addition to being a business person.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And you talked a little bit about kind of, the individualized approach that you all have when a patient is coming to you. It's not like what they think they need, but it's really more of you listening to their concerns and helping them get to that desired goal. So could you tell me a little bit more about your approach with treatment plans for patients that are coming to see you?
Yeah, and I would say first that always starts behind the scenes, and that really starts with the medical director. And I think medical director is important for a place that isn't physician owned but has hired the medical director. The truth is, a business owner sort of funds everything, and the medical director is in charge of everything from the clinical side, safety, protocols, consent forms, all that. And really it starts there with an understanding of what the medical director and the physician extenders feel comfortable and safe with, and verifying training and certification, getting third-party certification, not training within and so forth. Once we lay out those kind of protocols, then we implement. We start following those guidelines to a T. That gives a continuity in care and a consistency across providers. I've worked in practices where one provider has a completely different philosophy than another one, but yet they're working for the same business or company, and I found that hard to see how they could have a continuity in care. So, but that's where that starts, okay? And so, again, the consult would start with we do complimentary consultations. We think it takes away some of the bias, and takes away the salesy side of it. So it's really meant to educate, and we set up those rooms more like a living room than a formal desk. It's meant to be open, like you're sitting in a family room and you're just having a discussion, as opposed to the old days when a physician might sit behind a desk and authoritatively dictate knowledge downward. This is meant to be more of a sharing environment, and so that the patient feels comfortable asking or telling, and the provider can assess more, but it always starts with the assessment. And some of that assessment might even include psychosocial or mental health as well. One of my complaints, if you will, is mental health and how it can be abused in the cosmetic industry. Everything from body image dysmorphia or a provider taking advantage of somebody who all you have to do is suggest they need something and they're devastated and they're going to spend the rest of their lives paying you money to try to fix that, when that's not really healthy mentally. To my opinion, it's unethical and immoral. And so we do have to screen for mental health. Sometimes I'll ask questions. We have an advantage because we see the health history, and it sometimes gives us an indication. We might see a lot of medications that they're taking, that it might be a lot of anti-anxiety or even psychosomatic or antidepressives. That's not wrong. It's not unhealthy. Everyone might need some of that at some point, but that might be your first yellow flag, but not a red, but it might indicate that you might have to assess more in that area. Some of the things that we might ask a patient is things like, Mrs. Smith, tell me, which statement do you identify with more? Do you think looking good makes you feel good or feeling good makes you look good? Which one do you identify with? Neither is wrong, but the more healthy answer is feeling good makes you look good. People will answer that. That doesn't mean we're going to kick them out. They might answer it wrong, but we're not going to kick them out. But we still have some more questions if that's the case. And we're still a little suspicious. And we want to protect them from themselves. Sometimes we don't think they're the right fit because of mental reasons and so forth. And we will politely refer them somewhere else, and that, you have to do that gently. You can always say everything therapeutic. In cosmetic world, there are no emergencies. So we have time to do it right. We have time to listen. We have time to follow up. We have time to research. That is the right answer. And even talking to them therapeutically, we train the staff even when we're doing like these long procedures like cool sculpting. We're in there for a couple hours. Some of the things that we train ourselves with or observe or help each other, we'll tell the nurses like, well, you could write your note out here in the kitchen, or you could write it in there in the room that the patient's sitting in that can't leave. Which one do you think is more therapeutic? Even if you're not talking, just by your mere presence in the room offers yourself. And that's more therapeutic than not being in the room. So even those things make a difference in aesthetics versus managed care, where they might not have that luxury.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And right now, obviously, the aesthetic industry, the medical industry, everywhere kind of is evolving, it's always evolving. And so what kind of are you all looking at for like the next year or two with growth for the clinic? Like, what are some things that you're really excited about? What's on the top of your list that we really, really want to accomplish this?
There is a lot going on in the industry,
Yeah.
And when I think back, way back in the beginning when lasers and aesthetic medicine was really coming to be popular, I mean, they may have had some breakthroughs every 10 years, and then it was every 5 years. And now it's like every 2.5 years or faster. Major game changers are happening in the industry. And that's everything from advanced fillers and toxins. And gosh, think of what we have nowadays for the varieties of toxins versus the only one that existed for years, back in the day. And so, but what really excites me right now is the advancement in what I call laser-assisted medication, which is the ability to use lasers and medicine. And that would be things like using exosomes and so forth as well, using lasers to break the stratus corneum so that product could be introduced or get past the barrier first or with it. Lasers are so interesting with the physics side that they really focus very specifically on exact chromophores and so forth. Well, there's advantages to that, and smart people can figure that out and use that to make things happen, So T cells and exosomes and everything are definitely with the future. Lasers are getting much more advanced. They're getting smaller. They're getting more efficient. They're getting safer. They're using AI in lasers now to help you not make mistakes. With the computers and the AI doesn't make mistakes. In reality,
Yeah.
it doesn't tire, it doesn't have emotions and so forth. So it can do a job better in many cases, or it can check the provider, make sure that you haven't missed a step or anything.
For
But
sure.
that's where the future of lasers and medicine. There'll be lasers in every field of medicine:
Yeah.
pediatrics, oncology, gynecology, elderly, everything. It is going to be in every field of medicine, and kids who are being born now will never not know lasers.
Yeah. No, for sure. They're definitely evolving, and especially like you said with AI too. And AI is changing a lot of things, but we're going to be able to get to the point where, yeah, there's no mistakes really with the lasers. And they're, like you said, just checking the providers. So that's really, really exciting. And with Generations Medical Aesthetics, what do you all have exciting coming up? Is there anything business wise that you're super excited about?
Wow. I was loving to say something like, "Oh my God, we're having a grand open house" or something like
Yeah.
that. I'm going to embarrassingly tell you that we're so busy, we don't need to do that in reality. And
Yeah.
so we just end up, focusing on continued care, and we have trouble keeping up with the demand. So it's a fine line between burning out your staff and trying to get all the customers that really want to get in. And so I would always say those are really good options for branding you and reinforcing loyalty, and rewarding your customers and stuff like that. But we do that on our own without having to have an actual event. But I'm always
Yeah.
happy to have people swing by and introduce themselves, and we'll find the connections we have and everything else. And aesthetically, it's the fun side of medicine. And I remember when I was originally located in a internal medicine group, and they had given me one room to operate out of a 9-room family practice and stuff. Some of the physicians will walk by and say, "Bob, every time I'm on your side of the hallway, I hear a lot of laughter and giggling. Well, what are you guys doing?" And I go, "Well, I can't tell you. That's the fun side of medicine. If you want to
Yeah.
be on the fun side, come join us. We'll talk." But it was, there's just a difference in psychology. And as I often say, aesthetics has a lot to do with psychology, more than we realize. And, we can compliment someone's shoes in aesthetics, and it would be inappropriate to tell someone they have cancer, but you like their shoes. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So, it allows us to play at the bottom end of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it is sort of the fun side, and it should be.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It definitely is a more fun side than a lot of the other medical portions. You're normally not going to the doctor to have fun, but if
Right.
you're going to like the medical spa, it's almost like going to like get a massage, or
Yeah,
you're going to get a pedicure or manicure. Like you're taking care of
absolutely.
yourself. It's the self-care side of medicine.
Yeah, I joke about it. Managed care, nobody wants to go to the doctor, but they have to if they're injured or sick or broken. Whereas the aesthetic side, it is a very selfish day just for the individual. It is all
Yeah.
about them. They want to be pampered. They want to be complimented. They want to focus on their body image and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you usually can't blend them, and I see some doctors' offices try to blend their managed care with their aesthetic practice, but they're all sitting in the same waiting room. And I say, "Oh, that'll never work." The psychology is different. People who are sick don't want to be upsold like, "Oh, hey, we're culturing you for your bronchitis and stuff, but while you're waiting, do you want some Botox?" Like, that would just be wrong. And people who are healthy and want to take care of themselves, they walk into a waiting room and see anybody suffering. It actually changes their mentality. Like, "Oh my God, I don't know why I should be given to charity. You know what? I'm going to cancel my appointment." It takes away their ability to want to spend. So
Yeah.
they don't blend well. Those business models, and the psychology is different too. So, but you're right. Aesthetics is sort of the fun side. It doesn't mean it doesn't have some seriousness to it, or always safety first is still always
For
on the
sure.
forefront. But if you do that well, and then the customer shouldn't have to be worried about safety. It should be in the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's awesome. And I guess, too, what is the best way for people to find you? Best way for people to find Generations Medical Aesthetics as well? Website, obviously. I'll put everything in the show notes, too.
Great,
But
thank
if
you.
you want to give people a way
Sure.
to find you.
Our website is www.gmalaser.com, and we have an Instagram account, the same, gmalaser.com on Instagram is the two best ways to follow us or look us up and so forth. And we do a lot of social media and stuff to that effect. My media director and I, we always do this back and forth with what the right rule is and, how many times to post per day or week or stuff like that. And I think it's good for branding and educating and things like that, and it helps. But, we try to post at least 3 times a week. Some people say it's not enough. Others say it's just right for us. But we don't, we're not advertising. We don't have to yet. So it's still part of just branding, which is still important.
For sure, definitely. Well, awesome. I will include all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on and talking a little bit about business and everything about aesthetics as well. It's been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Taylor, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.